it was painful to watch my team crumble in these situations. And it takes a lot of humility to look at what's the reason for that? Because a lot of coaches will blame their players and they'll just say they couldn't do it, or this person, messed up, or this and that. And that's what I did the first year. I was like, yeah, it was kind of player. So I did everything I could. And when it happened again, I was like, I have to look at myself as a coach. This is too painful to be that close and not be able to finish because of mental errors.
Guest today is Bree Smedley. Bree has an incredible background in athletics. She's the founder and CEO of a company called the Elite Competitor. We're going to hear all about that and more. But Bree Smedley, welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, Bree, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us your quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own college days, and then we'll take a short break. But what's the Bree Smedley origin story?
Yeah, well, like you mentioned, I grew up in Vancouver, right around where you grew up too. So small world. But yeah, I was a multi-sport athlete growing up, kind of exposed to a lot of sports, but I found my love in volleyball because I was a 6 foot tall. So Mr. Brown, the math teacher, who's also a volleyball coach, quickly keyed on in on that and got me into volleyball. And come to find out, I really liked it better than anything else I tried because I did not like I didn't like the physical contact. I love that there was like a net between us. So fell in love with it, kind of dove in. Once I got to high school, I started playing club and kind of fell into the typical cycle of playing high school, then club, but club was not what it is now. I still was in the
Right.
days of club where it was like, we still got back to our high school seasons and it was fun. But I started getting good. I started getting recruited. And, by the time I was a senior, I was kind of faced with the opportunity to go play at the next level. And I did what nobody expected me to do. And I quit actually after my senior season in high school because what I can see now removed, like, gosh, 18 years, 20 years, can't even remember. I graduated in '07, was that I was dealing internally with what a lot of athletes deal with, pressure, perfectionism, especially girl athletes that are just feeling like they have to do everything perfectly or it's not good enough. And no one would really know that from the outside because I was a really talented player. But on the inside, it was just this pressure that I felt like was something I didn't want to handle for another 4 years. So instead of going on to play, I decided that I would walk away. Now, the thing about it is I went to, you're probably familiar with Western Washington University, about 5 hours north. And so I went to school there just to be a student. I told everybody I was burned out of volleyball. I'm just going to go and be a student. The secret was that I was not burned out of volleyball. I was burned out of feeling like I didn't know how to manage pregame anxiety. I just, all of those things that all athletes deal with, but most don't actually have a way to manage that. So I went to every single game at Western my freshman year. They made it to the national championship. And I was like, oh my gosh, I miss this so much. Like, I wish there was an opportunity. I mean, they had a phenomenal program. And so I reached out to the coach actually after they came back from the national championship. They were the runners up. And I just said, like, I'm looking for a place. I don't know. This is just a shot in the dark. Here's my story. And I just kind of had this feeling of if I don't try, then I'm just gonna regret not. And I was playing intramurals, but it just wasn't giving me the thing that I needed. And she actually responded and said, hey, you know what? Actually, I was friends with some of the girls on the volleyball team. She's like, Eric, I've heard of you. And why don't you come for a practice, a tryout just with me? And so I got in the gym. I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm so nervous. Went and played and was like, all right, that's that. Um, at least I tried. She called me into her office a couple days later and was like, I actually want to offer you a walk-on spot on the team. And I was like, so happy. I would have paid her to play. I did not care that I was not getting a scholarship, that I was walk on. I just was so happy to be back in the sport. And it was amazing. It was the best thing that could have happened to me because this coach was a coach more than just a physical. I got to learn strategies in sports psychology. I actually got interested in sports psychology, started studying it in my undergrad, and realized that there were like tools and strategies to build my own confidence and things to do to manage pregame nerves. By the time I was a senior, she called me back into her office and offered me a full ride scholarship. I was a starter. I was loving my sport again. So, yeah, so kind of an unconventional, college athletics story, but yeah, it takes me to graduation. I don't know if you want to break there and then kind of where it went after that was really impactful, but yeah, that's what got me there.
Well, guys, I just love to hear the stories, and thanks for sharing. I want to go back to those formative years, the middle school and the high school, you talk about how the teacher, classic story, sees the tall kid, and it could be a boy or a girl, in the hallway. Hey,
Yeah.
we'd like you to come out for that sport. Um, Back in your day, that I guess going into high school, um, did you think about doing other sports? Was the basketball coach in your ear, track, or were you just totally focused on the volleyball experience?
Yeah, actually my freshman year I ran cross country. So I like played in middle school and I was like, "Oh, I'll just try something else." And running is not as fun. But yeah, and then of course I was always basketball. It was always, I mean, being a tall girl, like people still ask me if I play basketball and you should. And I tried, I didn't like it. And so yeah, but I actually also golfed. I was a varsity golfer. In high school as well. So that was kind of I say I like tried a lot of sports, but I really like found where I fit in volleyball and in golf, and that's kind of where I dedicated my time.
Okay. Now, um, you talked about the anxiety that you were experiencing, either during or towards the end of your high school experience. Um, Trying to look at, and again, from a coaching perspective, now it's much better, but back in my day, and even beyond, that really wasn't something that we were taught as coaches, to the mental aspect of the game. um, for you, was that, looking back, was that just the way that you were wired? Do you feel, was the coach, and I'm not trying to throw the coach under the bus, was the coach
Mhm.
just creating this high pressure environment that made everybody nervous? Where do you think those feelings of anxiety came from?
Yeah, I think this is a good question because athletes are still experiencing this and at probably a bigger level. And it isn't necessarily anything the coach is doing or not doing. It's the nature of pressure when it comes to athletics and performance. And kids just are not really given the skills. And you say it's better now. It's not really. Like coaches aren't trained in this setting. That's why we do what we do. We can kind of get into how we help coaches with this and why it's so important is that these are all normal experiences. I wouldn't say that I was a highly anxious kid. I wouldn't say that this is actually abnormal. This was literally normal pregame anxiety that I just hadn't experienced before and so didn't know what to do about it. My coach wasn't trained and it's not my coach's fault because when I became a coach when I was 21 years old, I absolutely was not trained. I was barely trained in like how to run a team, let alone like how to coach the mental side of the sport. We're not sports psychologists as
Right.
coaches. That's why I'm like, we need to, equip coaches a little bit better. And that's why we do what we do, but we also equip parents. And, there's so much more that we can do, but it's also this like, well, how do you do it? So we can get into
Right.
that. But I will say just from my experience, no, it was not abnormal. I think that being a talented athlete, um, there's a couple things that we talk to parents about, and that is when you are a talented athlete, you automatically get noticed for your recognition, for the good things that you're doing for the team, your achievements, and then you start to kind of tie like that praise with your self-worth and with your contribution. Like, in order for me to get this praise and get this, all of these good things that are coming to me, I've got to perform. I remember I had like a game high kill, I had like 20 kills in a game, and it wasn't like a feeling of happiness that I had. It was a feeling of like, well, great, how am I supposed to do that again? And so I think a lot of athletes feel that way unintentionally. Our coaches and parents can like reinforce those things just by how where we're placing our praise and placing our emphasis and our recognition. It's not like we need to ignore all the things that our kids do, but if we can kind of shift that more to like what's the process associated with that, what are things that can be replicated. I can't necessarily replicate 20 kills in a game. There's so many other factors to that, but I can replicate my work ethic, how coachable I am, what type of teammate I am, the goals that I had leading up to that. Like all of that can be replicated. And so if we praise and emphasize those things can lead to confidence. So I think that it's a loaded question because it can come from a lot of different aspects and parenting and coaching and all of that. But no, my coaches were great and my parents were great. They were just doing the best they could and with what they knew. And um, all that to say, the message I'm hoping that coaches are hearing is that this is normal. Like all athletes are going to experience these things. And so just having a couple of tools to give them makes a huge difference when they're experiencing this.
Right. And again, I'm glad you elaborate on that. And for me, when I say it's better, what I mean is now there's an awareness of kids
Hmm.
are going through this. When I was a student athlete, when I was a young coach growing up, I mean, it was like, hey, suck it up. If it was
Hmm.
even addressed at all, So
Yeah.
that's what I meant. It's better now because there is the awareness. But you're right,
Hmm.
coaches still aren't getting the training that they really need to get. You
Yeah.
mentioned you went from college, your college playing experience, right into coaching. How did that all happen?
Yeah, well, part of my college coach's, I don't know, coaching like framework is that um, in order to know the game, the highest level is to teach it. And so she actually had opportunities for us to coach while we were still playing under her. She had a club that she owned and affiliated. So she gave us opportunities to actually coach while I was still in college. Excuse me. So I coached a couple club teams my junior and senior year. And then when I graduated, so I was in the teaching program, I have a master's in education. So I became a teacher right away and naturally became a coach as well. And, so they kind of were the package deal. And I was like, gung ho right out of college. I was taking over a program. And yeah, so I mean, I was in the high school teaching, I was teaching PE and health, I was coaching the volleyball team. So that's just kind of what it led into. And what I was excited to do was to give back to the game.
Um, as you were, and again, when we have this expression, whether it's a coach or an AD, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
Obviously, you knew skills and instruction and that sort of thing, but what were some things that you found out as a coach that you didn't know?
Yeah, I mean, right away, I noticed that my athletes were struggling with the same thing that I struggled with in high school, and even though I had been taught some of those skills from my coach, I was like, seems like a different ball game. And so early on in my coaching career, I was like, yeah, we can like practice and have really intentionally designed practices and make sure that the girls are getting all of like the training and the skills that they need. And yet still, practice looked really good. And then when we get in the game, it's like a different situation, or we get down and then we like can't recover, or if we lose the first like few points in a game, it's like it's just over from there and they don't believe in themselves. The first program I took over was a smaller program here in Washington and had a history of losing, and so that kind of became their identity and their belief. And I was there for 4 years or 3 years before, and really made some great strides, with the girls and turned the program around. They made their playoff, like they made it to playoffs for the first time in like decades or something like that. But we ultimately moved back to Vancouver where my family was when we were considering starting our family, and that's where I took over the program where I am now that I've been at 11 years. And it was here when I was coaching at Columbia River that I was like, I've got to do something about the mental side of the game. Like we lost in like back to back, and I had very talented players that were coming through my program, back to back years in this winner to state loser out situation where we were up 2 sets, up in the third set to go to state, and then we lose. We lose the set, and then we lose the next two games, and we call that a reverse sweep in volleyball. And it's like, how did that happen? Like we were talented enough to do it, but we just couldn't. And so um, about 5 years or 5 to 6 years of my coaching career, I actually went back to become a mental performance coach and like really learn how do I teach these skills to my kids? Like how can we do this? And I used my girls as like the pilot group, the test dummies to like consider and start learning some of these skills. So we taught, how to come back. We taught a snapback routine, how to come back from mistakes, taught pregame rituals. We did a daily mindset routine, some visualization. Like there's a lot of different skills that I started incorporating into the program with some good results. And, I've been doing it with my team for about 7 years now. So it's kind of just ingrained in our culture. But after started seeing like this actually is making a difference. I teamed up with my sister-in-law, who also has a background in athletics. We founded our company, the Elite Competitor. But we can go into kind of what that looks like now as well. But that's really where the gaps were and what I started to see. Like these girls need more than just physical skills.